Photoshop. I do all of my preliminary sketches and designs for all my projects here. I start on Photoshop because it allows me to take creative risks without the headaches. It's a lot easier to fix mistakes on Photoshop than it is with actual paint. And what I mean by that is whenever you want to take a risk, you can just do it on a new layer. So you can add a layer on top of your current project and you can make any adjustments, take any risks that you want. And if it's not working out for you, you can just delete that layer without it affecting your current project. So Photoshop can be a very complicated program depending on what you use it for. Uh, but since I only use it for sketches and basic painting, I can get away with the bare minimum. So just as a disclaimer, I've already done some sketches and designs just to save some time. But as I said, the first project that we're going to be working on is Lilith from the Borderlands franchise. So she's one of the original characters, and her look is has had some slight changes throughout the series, but I'm going to stay pretty basic and just go with, the typical bomber jacket and accessories and the original colors. So the game takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting, so her look kind of reflects that. But when you start, you always want to start with a little stick figure. It just kind of gives you a general idea as far as sizing and everything. Obviously, her head's going to be right here, her shoulders, her arms, and her arms are going to be crossed in front of her, kind of like a little pouty pose, but with a little hip curve at the bottom. So I did, like I said, a quick sketch. We'll get rid of the stick figure. And I did an outline just to kind of darken the lines, and I added her wings. But with that being said, she has wings that are made out of fire. Reflects her name, the Firehawk. And because we're going to include those, we are going to have two different equally bright light sources instead of the light source coming from the top, which is pretty typical, or from the bottom. The light sources are going to be coming from the left and right. And it's going to be slightly behind her. So, because of that, a majority of the shading and the darkness is going to run right down the middle of her body. So it's going to run right down the middle. And just to kind of show you what I mean by that, um, I did some preliminary shadows just to kind of give you a general idea of what I mean. So if you notice, all of the shading and the darkest parts of the lighting is going to run right down the middle, and it's going to highlight certain, contours of her body, and it's going to be darker along the inside of the arms because um, you want to give it dimension. And obviously, the light coming from her wings are going to reflect on the edges of her body. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that for a second. Uh, I'm obviously going to stay loyal to the source material, but I'm also going to be taking a few liberties. I am going to be dialing back her hair a little bit just to give it a more realistic and natural look. With the environment that the game takes place in, you don't want her to look like she just stepped out of a salon. So Lilith has very, very unique hair, as you can see. But like I said, we're going to kind of dial it back a little bit. I'm also going to be changing her tattoos. So Lilith is a siren in the game, and sirens have very, very luminous and unique tattoos that run down. It's different for everyone, but since we're going to be doing Lilith, her tattoos run down her neck, along her collarbone, and on her chest that run along her shoulder, down her arm, and down her hip. So they're kind of tribal, have kind of a funky look to them. It's kind of hard to describe, but they're very intricate and can be very difficult because you're wanting to put the tattoos on there, but you also want it to run along the shape of like her breast and her collarbone. So you want to be able to see those lines that go over those features. But with her tattoos, I'm going to take a liberty and I'm going to be designing them a little bit differently this time around. So instead of your traditional tattoo work, I'm going to be making them in a way that looks like it's breaking through her skin, kind of like volcanic cracks. Um, I'm going to dial back the light a little bit so they'll pop a lot more with that inner shadow that goes in her body. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do the traditional blue or if I'm going to go with the fire element and give it more of like an orange and yellow and red color to it. But I'll play around with it and just kind of decide what looks better at that point. So we'll figure that out a little further down the process. But now that we have a general concept and an outline, we can get ready for the transfer. Okay, so this is Adobe Acrobat. I transferred the image over to here, and I'll tell you why. So whenever I'm doing a picture to transfer over to a canvas, uh, I started over in Photoshop, and when I'm sizing it, so I always take the size of my canvas into mind when I'm working on something. So the size of my canvas is going to be 16 by 20. So when I saved or when I worked on this image, I made sure that the digital canvas size were those dimensions, 16 by 20. And the reason for that is when I move it over to here and I want to print it, you click on print, and obviously 16 by 20 is bigger than your typical sheet of paper. So you click on poster size and it will print it out in sections. So it prints out in sections. That way it will cover the entirety of your canvas. Okay, now that we got all the technical stuff out of the way, it's time to put your transfer paper and your image onto your canvas. So, what you want to do first is once you got your canvas and everything ready, prepped, gessoed, dried, sanded, everything ready to go. This is transfer paper. Um, the dark side is where your graphite is. So what you want to do is you want to cut out a piece of transfer paper, the size of your canvas, which ours is 16 by 20. So you want to tape it onto your canvas, make sure that it is nice and tight and snug. That way, when you're working on it and you're drawing on top of it and you're transferring your transfer paper doesn't shift and it doesn't bubble up. So once you have that taped on there, you want to take your image, which is in 4 sheets because we modified it to poster on Adobe Acrobat. So you're going to put them on top of your transfer paper. So um, you want it taped on there nice and snug, but you want it really, really on there because you don't want these images to shift around. It's kind of like a puzzle. So when you're taping it, I just have, your basic tape. I want to make sure I tape the corners and put any tape anywhere on the lines or on the separation of the sheets. Um, because you don't want these to shift. And when I say that is if they start shifting as you're tracing and getting the graphite onto your board, once you take off your transfer paper and your sheets, you're not even going to be able to recognize what's on your canvas. It's just going to be total chaos. So is when you're taping the separations of the sheets, you can put them wherever you want as long as it's on blank spaces. So you don't want them on any lines, your transfer lines or your pencil lines. So just put them in blank spaces to make sure that it is really, really on there. So once you have that done and it's nice and reinforced, it's not going anywhere, everything is nice and tight. What I like to do is I like to use uh, colored pencils. So I've got a red colored pencil here, nice and sharpened, and I like to go over the lines and because you can see where your progress is. You can see the progress lines. If you're doing it with just a regular pencil, sometimes you can kind of get lost and miss lines because you're not sure if you went over them or not. So um, you got to press nice and hard, but not hard enough to where you're shifting your paper. So you just, again, you take your red, make sure everything is nice and saturated, make sure every single line is covered with colored pencil, whether you choose red, whether you choose green, whether you choose blue, just make sure it's something very visible. So, and once that's all done, once everything's nice and covered, every single line is completely covered with the color of your choice. So I'm going to step back before I do anything, before I take it off. I want to make sure every single line is covered. And once we've established that every single line is covered, you can go ahead and pull everything off. And once you have everything off, you can look at your canvas and depending on how hard you pushed on the pencil, you'll be able to see your drawing on your directly on your canvas because of the graphite transfer paper. So if it's a little lighter than you're comfortable with, then you can go ahead and go over it again with a graphite pencil. Some of it may come off during the wash process, but as long as you have okay lines on there that you can see visibly, then you should be okay. And once you're happy with your transfer, everything is good to go, then you move on to your wash. Okay, so before we go any further, I am learning to be a multi-medium artist. I don't want to be just limited to one specific style of paint or one specific style of art. I'm trying to learn as many as possible because I don't want to be limited. Uh, with that being said, my primary style right now, or my primary choice of medium, is acrylics. I use fluids. There's several different types of paints out there. They have just stupid, ridiculously expensive paint, and then they have very, very, very cheap paint. I found myself a happy medium. I found myself a spot in the middle that I'm comfortable with. The one paint that I kind of prefer at this point is your Liquitex, Liquitex fluid paint. So we're not going to start painting yet, but what we're going to do is what you call a wash. So it's it's very difficult and it can be very very frustrating to paint on a white canvas. If you're painting an image or if you're painting a picture, um, the the abundant amount of white can be very very deceiving and it's kind of strainful on your eyes as well. It's kind of hard to focus. So what you do is called a wash. So you'll take this and you'll put it on a surface, whether it's a paper plate or a tray. Uh, and what you do is you apply paint to whatever. I prefer a paper plate, but I'll put it on a paper plate, and then I will put a pretty decent size amount of water to where it gets your paint to where it's almost has the the substance, kind of like the fluid of water. It's very, very thin, because what you don't want is you don't want your paint to be too thick and too dark. Otherwise, it's going to cover up your transfer image. So I'll go ahead and just put a quick wash. You always want to use, depending on what your picture is going to be and whether what your color spectrum is going to be. So my picture is going to be very dark warm tones, a lot of browns, a lot of oranges, a lot of really, really dark colors. So the color that I'm going with is a burnt sienna that'll give it a kind of like a dark, deep brownish red color to it. And when you apply that, hopefully your transfer lines stay, but your paint will stick a lot better to it, and it'll be a lot uh, easier on your eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a wash real quick. Okay, so we just finished our wash. It's not supposed to be overly dark. It's just supposed to kind of change the tone of the canvas and get rid of the white. You don't want to be painting on white. As I explained earlier, you just kind of want to give it more of a warmer tone, uh, so it's not so strainful on your eyes. And depending on what color you use for your wash, it adds different effects to your paint as you're putting it on the canvas. So in my case, with the color spectrum that I plan on going uh, with my project, it should look very, very, very well on this particular wash. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry, and once it's dried, that's pretty much your last step. We'll we're finally going to get to paint. So it's about time. So we're going to go ahead and let this dry, and then we'll do a quick video on how I set up. I mean, it's very important how you get yourself set up. That way, you're not constantly looking for things. You're not reaching for things. You want everything to be at your disposal. Your color palette, your supplies, everything you need, and we'll go over that right before we put brush to canvas.